Hey, welcome into the Sunday side session. This is Mike Schaefer, and when Nebraska men's athletics gets a double dip where it beats Creighton on a Friday, takes care of Wisconsin on a Saturday, neither game particularly close after the start, and Nebraska with a ton of good vibes. Who better to bring in than early break host Jake Sorensen, who usually spends his time moderating between Bill Bush and Steve Sipple. We're gonna give him as much time as he wants today to just go bananas. Jake Sorensen, how about that weekend?
Shafe, that was a top five, maybe top three Nebraska sports weekend ever. And I'm glad to be
Ever.
on because usually we're lamenting a loss of some sort on these airwaves, but today we're partying and I like to party. So it doesn't happen very often. So super pumped for today's show with you.
Yeah. It should be a good conversation. We are gonna hit mostly football, but we'll sneak a little basketball in. I know that Jake Sorensen wants to mention that John Hohl had more field goals than Ryan Kalkbrenner. I know he wants to say it.
Oh, yeah. Love that. Love
So
that
we'll
ongoing meme right now.
we'll dive into that later in case any J Skers are listening and they want to know. I'll give you the hint. I don't want to trigger anybody here. So all right, Nebraska football gets Wisconsin. I don't know how you were before the game or the lead up for it, Jake, but this was one of the games going back to the beginning of the season. I felt like Nebraska was going to win. I didn't think Wisconsin would be good this year, and they weren't good last night. And Nebraska took advantage of that. And what was great to see is not only did Nebraska take advantage of that, they never really let up. If that game had kept playing, they were going to get into the 50s. I mean, Wisconsin had no answer for Nebraska's offense, and they didn't reinvent the wheel. Like that was maybe my favorite part of how Saturday night played out. What Dana Holgorsen did, what Nebraska did was simple. It was effective. It wasn't gimmicky. There wasn't, a bunch of random Heinrich Harburg pass plays or triple option fakes or anything. There wasn't trick plays. They lined up a bunch of receivers to the left and ran behind a puller to the right. They hit inside runs. They ran out of formations under the center. They were able to hit short passes and some intermediate passes. In the future, they've got to hit some deeper passes. Way too many teams are playing Nebraska inside of 8 yards on the line of scrimmage right now. But just a really simple, easy, effective Nebraska offense. And they put up 44 points, nearly 500 yards of total offense. Just a big night for Nebraska. What did you see on the offensive side of the ball for the Huskers?
Well, I think Schaefer, I mean, it's a couple things. Last week they mentioned in post game that the O line played their best game of the season. I thought they played well again. I mean, this is for some reason under Holgorsen, the first two games he's coached, the line has been really good. No sacks allowed for Dylan Raiola. The running game was excellent with Emmett Johnson and Dowdell. I mean, just nothing went wrong. They had very few negative plays. You didn't have,
They didn't have any negative plays. They had
right. I
zero
mean,
negative plays. I don't know how
nothing.
often that has happened. I don't remember it happening this season. I'd have to go back and look, maybe UTEP, but no sacks, no tackles for a loss. And I think one total statistical play that was a 0-yard game.
Well, we point out that when Holgorsen was hired, this is a guy obviously that's an offensive genius of sorts, and like you said, he didn't reinvent the wheel. It's just common sense plays. And finally, the last two games, you've seen Jamal Banks kind of like reinvent himself. I mean, these guys who had problems all season getting separation, they're now getting open because of quick hitting routes. Holgorsen's dialing up, and Raiola's seeing it, and you've seen a quarterback whose confidence I think was rattled for a month and a half is back. I mean, Dylan looked great yesterday in that game. I had really very few things to say bad about him in that game. I know he missed Barney in one spot that could have been a first down, but that's really it. 44 points is 44 points. And just super excited. I mean, now you have Iowa coming up in a game that it's stress-free. You're not going to Iowa worrying about, okay, we got to win this game to get to bowl game. Now we get to see Nebraska finally play that game, knowing the monkey's off your back, your stress is gone, and let's just go beat these guys in the road. But just super impressed, Schaefer. I thought it was well balanced by Holgorsen. I mean, again, both passing and rushing were both very efficient, very effective, and you just saw a Wisconsin team that just really withered and died defensively, and that's just a glorious thing to see when that's been the other way around for so many years for Nebraska's defense versus that offense.
Yeah, I was thinking to myself, if there was a team where Nebraska just hung a 50 burger on them and it felt like it was pretty deserved,
Why
like
not 60?
if they would have run a play when they brought Heinrich Harburg in, and they're obviously just running the clock down. If they would have run the play at that time where he fakes a handoff and then just drops back and chucks it to a wide open guy down the field, it would have been the most deserved touchdown that was unnecessary in Nebraska's football history, I think.
And
I don't know that there's a program that deserves that more than Wisconsin.
Yeah, with that being said, I don't think that Luke Fickell would say in postgame that was a cheap shot. He'd say, yeah, we beat them 10 straight times. It's been since 2012. We get it. We understand that that last touchdown, and no issues with that at all. If they had gone for that, but Nebraska did not. They still won the game by 19, and we're sitting here very happy this morning talking about where Nebraska might go to a bowl game.
Yeah, that's a fun conversation that's actually real, instead of people getting mad every week when we put a compilation of bowl projections together and there's always the first comment of, oh, bowl projections, why don't they make a bowl first? Well, here they are. They made one. Right. Now all the people that have been abstaining, all 0 of you, because people love to read it. It's like mock drafts. People get mad about mock drafts. What do? They read them.
Oh, yeah.
Same with bowl projections. Same with NCAA bracket projections, where maybe Nebraska is going to sneak on a line or two after that win. So we're here for projections. We love projections. All right. Before we have to start projecting what's going to happen in Iowa, let's go back to this. The offensive line played really well. You talked about how they had played well the week before against USC. What, again, just stands out is that there's not anything that they're being asked to do that seems completely unnatural. I love seeing, and I commented on it earlier, Holgorsen just dressing the wide receivers bunched to the left side, and that's the wide part of the field. And then the play is just a straight handoff off tackle with a pulling guard going the other way. And Wisconsin is just like completely and utterly out of position. And Nebraska's just running down the field with abandon. Like you haven't seen this that often. I mean, Emmett Johnson looked really good. I am still not at the point where I think Emmett Johnson's a future superstar. There are people that are there, but he's been a really effective running back for Nebraska. He deserved a day like this. The one regret for him probably is he didn't get into the end zone, but it felt like he was a leadoff hitter, just setting the table every time. And then Dante Dowdell got to come up and hit a sack fly, hit a nice single. His 12-yard run might have went for 72 if it was, in that part of the field. But it just felt like an effective 1-2 punch in that running game, in large part because of that offensive line. And again, they didn't swap any pieces out. It didn't feel like they did anything differently. And people might not believe this after what they saw last night, but that Wisconsin defense, in some measures, was the third-ranked defense in the Big Ten coming into the game. And I didn't think they were good, but Nebraska certainly made sure that they weren't on Saturday. Even the run game, impressive.
Yeah, so the week before, they allow 16 points in a loss to Oregon. Say, okay, Wisconsin's defense is legit. It's back after winning a loss at home to number 1 ranked Oregon. But like you said about having 3 receivers to the left and running the football, that's the Holgorsen effect. I mean, Marcus Satterfield's offense was so predictable. There's nothing that surprised the defense. I mean, they had early on the wrinkle of the receiver sweep with Barney, and that was working for a while, but people caught on to that because that was the only wrinkle they had offensively. And so, I mean, I still criticize Matt Rule for keeping Satterfield around as the OC when people saw last year that wasn't working and nothing really changed. And so I also compliment him for making the change to Holgorsen before the USC game, but also that could have happened in the offseason possibly. So I don't want to make sure I call him an evil genius by doing that in November, but still it worked out. And that's, again, having a fresh set of eyes, like he said, on the program. Just again, it's not reinventing the wheel. It's just, how can you confuse a defense? How can you make them think that something else is coming and then do something totally different? That's not rocket science. That's just a guy that's been a very good play caller for years saying, listen, I have these certain players. I can't change that, but I can change how they view this offense, how they operate, and we could make some yards that haven't been there. So it's a major kudos to Holgorsen and just being creative. Schaefer, it's not hard to be creative. I don't think it
I
is.
Well, it depends on what level of creative. Sometimes I
Sure.
feel exhausted coming up with random things on, March 14th to write about with Nebraska
Understand.
football. But your point is taken here. This is going to sound really stupid, but I just try to go with the premise that I'm going to offer up here. Is play calling sometimes just the fact that even if these guys don't know who Dana Holgorsen was before he was hired, you look him up, you Google the offense, you're looking at the stats, you're watching highlights. Is it possible that Nebraska players just have more confidence in what is being called so they're able to effectively go and run it? Like they're confident that Dana Holgorsen has this history of putting people in successful spots. So without even needing to really have this long history themselves of doing it under Dana Holgorsen, there's just this belief in that he's going to call a play that's going to work. So then they're more capable of running the play because they're confident that they can do it. Like, is
Yeah.
there a reinforcement circle going on here?
Well, I think it has to go back to practice, saying, hey, is the stuff he's calling in practice working? If so, if they're getting yardage in the defense, all right, there's something there. And then look at the opening drive. You have the great kick return by Barney to about midfield, and they scored in a couple plays. And that's just validation. I know they didn't score the next drive after that, but then you get the missed field goal after the fumble by Wisconsin. That kind of still puts some mojo into your step, and then the rest of the game was history for Nebraska. But I look at one play in particular, Schaefer. I was just at the Chiefs-Broncos game a couple weeks ago, and there's a play that the Chiefs run that always works when they're trying to get a couple yards, and it's just Mahomes snaps it, and right away, it's a forward pass to the right side for 7 yards. Easy as that. That was the same play Nebraska ran to Emmett Johnson that got him down in about the 5-yard line when they made it 34-10 the next play. Simple play. It's just snap and right away open to Johnson. You never saw any play like that ever when Satterfield called the offense. I don't know if that's just the way he told Raiola to think or how long these plays took to develop, but that was such an open play that was not defended at all by Wisconsin. That's the stuff I'm sure that he was doing in practice, saying, hey guys, I promise you this play will work a couple times. It won't work every time, but this will be a hitter that is so simple that gets us big yards. Just trust me. And they see that work in the game. And so now your confidence level is just saying, all right, this dude gets it. Like we're going to have some bad plays in there. It's just that's football. But this dude understands how to put us in great situations. And that comparison to what I saw in that Chiefs game with Mahomes to Raiola to Emma Johnson, like that play always works for the Chiefs, and it worked so perfectly for Raiola. That you have to make that a part of the offense going forward. It's so simple.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about there, and I think a lot of it has to do with Dylan's ability to recognize the look that the defense is going to give, because even when things had gone wrong earlier in the year, sometimes it just wasn't knowing. The Thomas Fidone play comes to the mind in the UCLA game. They got the look they wanted. He didn't throw to where he's supposed to. Saturday, when they were getting the look they wanted, he absolutely got the ball to where it needed to go. One of the things that also stands out to me, and we're staying on the offense, we're going to switch here shortly to defense and special teams. But one of the things that kind of stands out to me is how quickly the type of Nebraska team that you're getting in like the first half of a game or the first quarter of a game. When Ja'Cory Barney had that big return and Nebraska went right down and scored, it told me that they were going to play at a much better level than usual. Like it wasn't like it's an opening touchdown. Remember how they would do that in 2022? Like they just came out and scored right away against Minnesota. You're like, oh, this is going to be a different day for Nebraska. And then eventually the points just stopped because the other team made an adjustment and Nebraska couldn't adjust back. If Wisconsin made an adjustment the next 2 drives, I don't know that they really did. I think Nebraska didn't just complete and finish plays. Nebraska had an answer for it by that 4th drive, and then they had an answer for everything after that. I mean, they had 2 punts on the day, 1 fumble. They only had 3 drives that didn't result in points. They were getting up and down the field. They took advantage of things, and you could just tell early on, like it looked really crisp, and it looked like they believed that they could do what they could do. And then you just got strong performances. Want to ask you your thoughts on Thomas Fidone? Had the false start, and then we didn't really see him much after that. And there was a lot of Borkircher, a lot of Luke Lindenmeyer. Is there any takeaway that you have from that? Do you think that those two guys help Nebraska's running game a little bit too? Because Nebraska certainly would use Luke Lindenmeyer in the way that previous teams had used Chancellor Brewington.
Yes, I do. I mean, I caught that. I mean, when Fidone didn't go back in the game, the offense still looked great. It wasn't like they missed a piece without him. Like you said, those guys still got some catches. The running game was very good with them blocking. I mean, at this point, we're not trying to play favorites. We're trying to make a bowl game. Fidone, yeah, you're a 4-star guy. You're the number 1 tight end in the country when you came out. There's so much talk about you, but you can't make that mistake. You can't have a false start when we're trying to score points. And is that, was that maybe harsh to not put him back in? Sure. But listen, the offense didn't drop without him. So why put him back in if they're moving the ball well, if they're still blocking well? He should understand that, listen, I'm not the only tight end on this roster. There's guys that are talented on this team that block well, that can catch. And I had no problem with it. If he leaves, if he's out of here, I mean, again, who knows what kind of players you leave after the season. The portal changes all sorts of things, and he might be one of the guys that leaves. But listen, the mission was accomplished. Nebraska won the game. Nebraska's going bowling. I hope he's happy that the team won the football game and understands that he got benched for a reason. That was his fault with the false start, and you couldn't afford negative plays. And kudos to the team for responding well and just really having no mistakes the rest of the game, it felt like, after that moment.
Yeah, it was a very limited mistake. I wouldn't say a mistake-free game, but one of the very low mistake games that we can think of for Nebraska football. Let's switch over to defense. Probably a little less exciting to talk about. One of the great stats for Nebraska yesterday, no sacks allowed, no tackles for loss allowed. Nebraska's defense didn't get a sack. Nebraska's defense allowed 292 yards passing to Braden Locke, which is the second most he's put up this year, other than a game against Purdue. You don't want to be the second most when Purdue's the first most, because that's, company you're not looking to keep. They couldn't get pressure on him. They couldn't stop him in the back end. I don't worry about what Iowa's passing attack can do, but I want to know what has happened in Nebraska's secondary. I mean, they were able to keep Ohio State in check because that defensive line wrecked the game. If the defensive line doesn't wreck a game, Nebraska got thrown all over by UCLA, by USC, and now by Wisconsin. I mean, you can't afford to make Iowa's passing attack look good next Friday. Do you think they can get things tightened up in a week?
I think so. I mean, I'm not scared at all of Iowa's passing attack. I know Jackson Stratton played well in the win against Maryland yesterday, but I still don't really fear that group at all. But
you put that more on Mike Locksley?
Yeah, I would. I'd say Locksley. Maryland was. They've been making bowl games for years. I
was going to say we make fun of Mike Locksley, but they've been better than Nebraska. So I want that caveat out there.
They have really just become a dead fish this year, the last month or so. So I don't really put much stock into them. But yeah, it's a great question, Schaefer, because I mean, yeah, you're right. Coming in, we laughed all week about Luke Fickell saying we don't have a play caller. We're going to do a variety of guys to replace Phil Longo. Well, your offense sucks. That's going to be kind of weird. And they moved the ball. And those first two drives, like, what's going on? Why is the slant route always open in the middle? I mean, it's just there's no safety or linebacker here. This should not be rocket science to cover this route. I mean, come on, Tony, get this figured out, or John Butler. I mean, so yeah, it's concerning. And then what really kind of pissed me off was
here we go.
Was the play, the game, Nebraska won the game handily, but when they have to take a shot and Bly Hill gets beat deep for the touchdown to Vinny Anthony in the fourth quarter, like what are you doing? That they're not going to run the ball. They're down by a ton of points. You can't let that play happen. And it was wide open. And I know we haven't seen a lot of Bly Hill this year because we had the injury in the spring ball and got a spot taken on the roster. And Tommy Hill being out for the season now opens up that spot for Bly to play there. But I was just, that can't happen. That's the kind of stuff that prevents a team from getting that big win that they did get. but that's been the type of play that's kept Nebraska from getting to where they want to be. And thankfully, the offense came back and scored to put the game away. But I just said, how can that happen in that situation that's wide open? Come on. You can't get beat by the deep ball there. So, yeah, disappointing. But to answer your question, Schaefer, it's just because Iowa does not scare me in the passing game. I'm not concerned about them, a ton this upcoming weekend. But when we talk about a bowl game, because that's going to be the case in December, I mean, teams can pass the football. You got to figure out what's going to go on in that secondary.
It is legal in other conferences to throw the ball.
Hartzog has had a rough go last few weeks. I know he's got 4 picks in the season, but he had a rough couple weeks in a row. Bly Hill was not great yesterday. The safeties also were not great in that game yesterday. But I don't want to sit here and lament a 19-point win and say the defense was bad, because they weren't great. But guess what? The offense did their job to put a bunch of points on the scoreboard, and we're talking about a 6-5 team going to a bowl game that has some flaws. But at 6-5, you have flaws with that kind of record.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I don't want to dwell on the defense either, but I do think it's worth kind of having that discussion, because you're also now just a little more than a week away from Nationals early signing day.
Yep.
You're going to have the transfer portal start in, early to mid-December. December 9th, I believe, is the first day. Like, they've got to have a feel for what it is they need to get. And right now it's hard to not look at the secondary and think, all right, if you're not willing to play some of these young guys, even though you have the same veterans make mistake after mistake after mistake, are you going to go into the portal and get somebody at safety or at corner? Like, do they have to? And it's a real conversation to me, because I don't feel great about what's happened back there this year. And it's wild, because John Butler, I think, is a good coach, but he hasn't been able to put his stamp on this organization yet. I think Tony White has struggled in the follow-up from last year. I think a lot of it has to do with Nebraska's defensive line is really hit or miss. And, that's a credit to the offensive lines they go against, but it's also, you need a better Jamari Butler sometimes. You need Ty Robinson to have to win more often. I don't know if Nebraska's backup defensive linemen have been, as strong. And why am I bringing this up on a day that, is celebratory? The idea to me is, Nebraska got to this 6th win. You want this to be sustainable, and you want this to be the last year where we're having to have a party because they got to the 6th win. Mm-hmm. And I'm a little concerned that with a veteran team and a veteran defense, that they're not particularly playing great here. And they're going to have to go to some young guys that they clearly seem hesitant to play. Now, people like Willis McGahee, Vincent Shavers, excited about that.
Yes.
Keona Davis and Riley Van Poppel, excited about that. But the secondary, man, I don't know. I don't know that Sierra Wright's about the only thing that I'm, reasonably excited about. And what was interesting is they didn't use him a ton at times yesterday. He was playing as a gunner. He was, but he wasn't just lined up as a straight corner. It was just an interesting day all in all with Nebraska's defense. But yeah, we don't need to dwell on it, especially when we can talk of things like, does Nebraska have their kicker for the foreseeable future? And John Hohl, who's just been perfect, who, as we pointed out, more field goals this weekend than Ryan Kalkbrenner. John Hohl, 3 more field goals. Yeah, they weren't the longest. I think he made a 45, but still,
that's good.
Nebraska getting points, winning plus territory this season after the way everything had kind of started for them, has to make Dana Holgorsen feel even better and Nebraska's offense feel more confident, knowing, hey, if we don't get this 3rd down, it's not life or death on the next 4th, because we're getting at least 3 points here. Well,
Schaefer, has he made 8 straight kicks now? 8 straight field goals?
I believe it is. It was 3 at Ohio State, 2 against USC, and 3 against Wisconsin. You got to throw the caveat in there, and I don't think it was his fault. I think it was a snap issue, but they did miss the extra point against UCLA. Yeah. So it's 8 straight field goals, which counts more. So that's even more important.
Okay, but think about that, Schaefer, especially all 3 of those situations. You're playing the first of that, you're playing at Ohio State in the shoe. That's a very daunting place. I know it's 11 a.m., but that's a top 5 team, and he drilled 3. It was awesome in that game against USC.
Well, and 2 were deep. Like, that's the other 50. Thing. These weren't gimmies. They weren't chip shots.
50 yards, yeah. And then against USC, again, iconic plays, tough place to play. Just drilled two again. Unfortunately, those were not touchdowns in those red zone situations, but he made them right down the middle, no problems. And that we saw Vakos miss 2 kicks yesterday for Wisconsin. He pulled both left, and that was critical for the Badgers in terms of their momentum and their feel. And then I think about the last minute of the first half is when things really ended for Nebraska. Nebraska is up 14-10. They get a touchdown with 30 seconds to go and a beautiful catch from Jamal Banks in the back of the end zone. First play of the drive, Wisconsin fumbles the football. You get a quick 10-yard pass, and then here comes John Hohl to drill it right down the middle, make it 24-10, and boom, hey, you're breathing easier at that point, saying, all right, we got a 14-point lead out of nowhere with 30 seconds to go in the half. And the thing with him, Schaefer, is that he's just drilled these down the middle. Like they're not barely sneaking in. They are right down the pipe, like prime, not 2024, but like prime Justin Tucker with the Ravens. It's like,
okay, let's rein it in here.
I'm just saying the way they're
talking
going
about
down
one
the
of the
middle,
best kickers of all time in terms of Justin Tucker.
I'm just saying, hey, I said the last 8 kicks, Schaefer. I didn't say the whole season. The last 8 kicks, it's a wonderful trajectory. It's down the middle. You're like, man, this is what it's supposed to look like. This is fine. Let's bring back Alex Henry then back in the day. Is that you want to make it more Nebraska focused here? Reminds me of Alex Henry. So
I feel like you're less tempting the fates with Alex Henry than you are Justin Tucker.
It's a great story because before the year is Tristan Alvano. He's the guy. He gets hurt. John Hohl comes in and has just a terrible start. The Purdue game, we will never forget the bad kicks in the first half of that game. 2 block kicks, just horrible. But he righted the ship, and you got to give credit to Ed Foley, who's been criticized all year for that unit. That's got to be partially him, but also Brett Maher comes in and helps the team in teaching and helping there. And it's amazing the flip you've had from, oh God, here we go, to, okay, let's make a kick in just a couple of games. So yeah, John Hohl has just really certified himself here in this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's great because, like I said, being able to play where Nebraska's issue, even under Marcus Satterfield, it wasn't so much that they couldn't move the ball. They were in plus territory a lot. It's that they couldn't finish drives. It's that they would eventually stall out because everything was just this grind. And then you'd need to be able to rely on at least getting some points, and they couldn't do that for a few games, and it cost them. It's probably a different game against Illinois if you're getting that field goal there versus, having to try to go for it on 4th down or what have you. So it's a situation where you would like to see Nebraska continue to have success with the field goal kicker. You think, again, it adds to the confidence of this team. They felt like a different group on Saturday because it wasn't like 3rd down. Are they going to be able to pick it up? Are they going to do what they need to do? Or is it going to go sideways? And it really didn't. And you saw that with the way that Dylan played, 293 yards, his best performance really since the Illinois game, where I thought that's when Nebraska's offense looked like they were at its best. I know they only had 24 points, but they were moving up and down the field against an Illinois team that's going to finish the year as a 9-win team. They had the season I thought Nebraska was capable of having, beating the teams that you should beat, maybe stealing a game, and then you drop a few to the teams people expect you to lose to. And that season didn't manifest for Nebraska. They still have the opportunity on Friday to get that 7th win and then go play for a bowl game. And that's going to be exciting for them. But I think having John Hohl as an available option, as a guy that you could rely on, even a game like, Friday, how often has Black Friday come down to having a field goal kicker for Iowa just drill a field goal through the uprights and then blowing kisses to the sidelines of Nebraska? Like this has been kind of routine in this series where it's sort of a walk-off field goal kicker. Now, if you're Nebraska, you got an opportunity to do it yourself.
Think about that for a second, though, Schaefer, is that would just be the ultimate cherry on top for a roller coaster season. The 3-0 start, then the loss to Illinois. You're 5-1. You're feeling great. And, of course, you hit the valley of the 4 straight losses to Indiana, Ohio State, UCLA, USC. And if you end the season by beating 2 teams that have just been kicking your butt for 10 years now in Wisconsin and Iowa, again, like you said, not the 9-3 year you maybe wanted or 8-4 like you wanted, but if you end 7-5, let's say you go to a bowl game and win it, you get 8-5. I mean, that's 8-5,
Progress.
you take that. You take that all day. Say, all right,
Yeah.
again, one better, but 8-5 is solid, and that's progress. And you're building something at that point. And again, at that point, you have to hope you keep Holgorsen in the offseason to stick with his offense, which is not a guarantee. But that'd be the hope.
If you're Dana Holgorsen, do you not have the best possible situation for yourself right now? This is a guy who doesn't want to recruit, doesn't want to deal with NIL, and now all he has to do is be offensive coordinator. Wouldn't have to go on the road to recruit. Doesn't have to deal with NIL. Gets to draw up plays. Basically, gets to try to create an offense where a place with better resources and anywhere he's been in his career can take advantage of those resources for player procurement. I would have to think it would have to be an epic job for him to want to leave. And you got to remember, he got ran out of Houston. So it's not like someone's going to come calling, if I don't even know, like pick a school that might have a job open. Like Florida State isn't going to come calling for Dana Holgorsen. Colorado, if Deion Sanders leaves, isn't going to come calling for Dana Holgorsen. So I feel pretty confident Nebraska is going to be able to offer him a great opportunity, kind of what Chip Kelly is doing for Ohio State right now. Like, you want to play mad scientist and get paid really good money and not have to do as much work, and you only have to worry about one side of the ball. That's probably pretty appealing to a guy like Dana Holgorsen, and it works, I think, pretty well with Matt Rule, because I think Matt Rule needs someone like that to kind of counterbalance the fact that he's just not an offensive guy.
Right.
And the picture just makes a lot of sense to me.
I agree.
So, all right, let's I promised some basketball talk. You are as big of a Nebraska basketball guy as there is. You are as big of a Creighton hater as there is. Friday night had to be quite the ultimate joy for you because Nebraska goes into Creighton, takes over the game from the very beginning, never really lets the Blue Jays in it. They got within 5, I think, once in the second half. They got to 6 a couple times. But Nebraska kept them at an arm's length pretty much all day. Did you have any inclination a performance like that was even possible?
Well, I would say maybe a little bit, just because I don't think Creighton is very good this year. I'm not trying to take shots after the loss, but that team is so dependent on Kalkbrenner. They don't have an elite shooter. How many Creighton teams in the years past, Schaefer, do you know that had 1 or 2 or 3 fantastic shooters? They usually have that. This year, even in their first couple of games, I think Ashworth, who got hurt, he can't shoot the 3, and McAndrew, the freshman, can shoot the 3, but Trout shouldn't shoot the 3 that well. I just don't think that the roster is where they need it to be this year. So I thought that Nebraska said, hey, what worked in 2022 in this building? Let's do the same thing. Let's find a way to double Kalkbrenner and make them beat us from the perimeter. And they were 12 or 42. They shot 42 threes. They looked lost out there. I mean, like you said, how does a 7'1" guy who's a All-American take one shot in the game?
National Player of the Year candidate. That's right. What Ryan Kalkbrenner.
He took one shot. Now, again, a couple of those were fouls. They don't count. So he only had one shot taken. But it was just Nate Lenzer, Nebraska's defensive guy, did a phenomenal job on the scout. Hoiberg got. I mean, Schaefer, in a rivalry that has been really, again, dominated by Creighton in the last 10, 12 years or so, if not more than that, I've never understood why it felt like they always were the aggressor, and Nebraska has been kind of just lackadaisical when they played the game. This game was 40 minutes of hell for Creighton. I mean, Nebraska was relentless on the boards, driving the ball at Kalkbrenner offensively. I mean, just getting in the lane. I mean, this team does not like to shoot the 3. They're not a 3-point shooting team, but I love the aggression of Jawan and Gary going to the hole, and Bryce Williams with the mid-range jumpers, and Connor Season just being diabolical in his he was when did
you enjoy the Connor Season greater than Connor Happer at the end of that game?
I like that one.
Yeah.
But when you recruited a Season, you thought, hey, 3-point shooter, but he's really been good at driving the ball and getting to the free throw line, and I appreciate that he's not just a one-trick pony shooting threes. Now, he's good at that, but he wants to be more than that. And so I was so proud they never let down. They never let the foot off the gas. Like you said, it got kind of close at times in the second half, and they responded by great defensive possessions, by getting a 3 or getting inside the barricade for a layup. And what a superb performance by this squad. And that just proves to me how good St. Mary's is. St. Mary's is a good team that you lost to on Sunday in Sioux Falls, and that really, for them, it validates their win, saying, okay, that was a good Nebraska team we beat by 3 points in Sioux Falls. Great, great neutral site win for the Gales. But yeah, I didn't see that type of performance, I suppose, after the first few games of the year when they looked kind of bad against, Rio Grande Valley and FDU, but they're gelling already through 5 games, which we didn't see maybe in the first 3 games. So what an effort, what a performance, and major kudos to every person on that squad. Everybody.
Yeah, I think Creighton will be fine. I think they have enough talent; they'll figure it out. And I think Greg McDermott's a really good coach. But it was mostly just a continuation of, I think, from the 10-minute mark in the first half up in Sioux Falls, we saw kind of the best version of Nebraska at that point. And then it went away in the second half, and then they had a flurry late. And I think I told you and Sipple on the spillover on Thursday, Randy Bennett was actually fairly impressed by what Nebraska was able to do with their bigs. And I don't know that I have given enough credit to the idea that Burke could be as effective as he is on both ends of the court. I mean, he's kind of a throwback player in that he does everything pretty well. Like, he doesn't necessarily have any one great skill, but he can rebound. He can get steals. He can play good defense. He can play off the ball defense. He can play on the ball defense. He can avoid picking up dumb fouls. He can get, he can get up on the glass. He can just be effective on that end of it. And then offensively, he can handle the ball a little bit. You can play a 2-man game with him. You can let him get downhill. He's comfortable attacking. He's actually adequate at finishing. And they tell us, which he made one of them, and maybe this will kind of, get the thaw broken, get the ice broken here a little bit and let things going. But he made a 3, and he can shoot at the free throw line. Like, his emergence as the third guy to go alongside of Gary and Williams, and then you have Connor Essegian, who I think is only going to get better. And you mentioned how well he played, his stepping inside of the 3-point line and just hitting 16-footers when Creighton was going to allow that, forced Creighton to have to change how they play defense. And then Nebraska adjusted off of that. I thought it was a really smartly played game by Nebraska. They only had a handful of just sort of dumb mistakes. I think Raleigh Wooster is really valuable to Nebraska. I just need him to handle the ball a little better. It's been a little cavalier. I think there's a big difference between him and Ulis when the two of them are on the court. And so you need Wooster to be able to give you 30 minutes and to be able to give you better ball handling. And so if he can do that going forward, I think Nebraska is going to be in a pretty good spot. I mean, I'm going to stop way short of talking about the tournament or anything of that nature, but they're clearly better than what they've shown through the first 3 games of the season with what we've seen in the last 2.
Well, what really gives me a lot of hope, Schaefer's, and I think this frustrated Kalkbrenner and McDermott to a certain extent, is they didn't, they knew on the roster that they had it, but Nebraska's got 3 bigs. They've got 3 solid bigs. Mia does not shoot the ball, but he's a great defender. He rebounds well, and he was causing problems for Kalkbrenner down low. He was. And then, Morgan comes in, and he's just a sound basketball player from North Dakota State. I love that kid. Like, he's not going to put up 15 points in a game, he's going to usually make his free throws. He's going to get to the line. He's going to play good defense. And then if those guys are in trouble, Berke's not a traditional big, but he's 6'9". And he can hold himself down low with the big guys. So, I mean, they were all in foul trouble, and it didn't matter because they had enough to give still with 3 guys that could play defense, that the whole game you could frustrate Kalkbrenner. And that's going to be the case in Big Ten play. And, I still am concerned about their ability to make threes when they have to. They don't, Essegian can, and Griffiths, I think, should. He has not done it yet. Griffiths should be able to make threes for this team, and Bryce can to a certain extent. But I think you said it earlier, Schaefer, it's really fun. This team plays old school basketball. They get to the lane. Bryce Williams is so good at the mid-range jumper. It's ridiculous. Like, you don't see that basketball really anywhere anymore. And I appreciate that. That he just keeps taking those shots and makes almost all of them. And Raleigh did the same thing. Juwan Garrigan never is the best shooter, but just the way he can be an alpha at times, made that clutch three at the end of the shot clock. He was bullying Kalkbrenner down low as he drove the lane continuously, and that dude has incredible hops. Also, he jumps over guys to get rebounds. He's just an incredible athlete. I really think that you have a team with in extreme toughness, which has not been the case for Nebraska in years past, and that's what's caused them issues. And they were the tougher team on Friday by far than Creighton, and they have, I think, the swagger and the toughness to bang around in the Big Ten and cause some problems. So, like you said, I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, this is a tournament team here in late November. They got some tough games ahead to prove that, but you have to like what you see, even with that loss to St. Mary's through 5 games, that, hey, this team has got some good potential. I like what I see.
All right. Anybody enjoying what Jake Sorensen has to say? Where can they listen to you during the week? Where are you most available?
Well, if you are in the Lincoln vicinity, you can listen at 93.7 FM. If you are across the country and you can't do that, there's several ways. You can go to theticketfm.com or download our free app, 93.7 The Ticket, on any sort of place you buy your apps from, or it's free where you get your apps from. And if you want to watch our ugly mugs on TV, we're on YouTube. We're on Facebook. We're on X. You can find that also. Also, if you are in Nebraska, we're on Allo, channel 961 statewide. So if you're in Scottsbluff, tune us in at 5 a.m. your time, 6 a.m. our time. We'll be on the TV. And again, all that stuff. So if you don't get up early, you can always rewatch that or find us on any podcast that you find with your podcast. But early break with Steve Sipple, Jake Sorensen, Bill Bush on 93.7 The Ticket, KNTK FM in Lincoln.
Look at that. Just all sorts of exposure, you guys.
Hey, I'm pumped, Schaefer. I am pumped right now. What a weekend it was. And these guys, let's get the win today too. Beat those Patriots today.
All right, look at that. That's important to me in my survivor pool. So I'm on the Dolphins today. That was another reason why I wanted to bring you on, just so I could warn you that if you get a bunch of angry texts later, it's because the Dolphins have cost me money. A feeling I'm sure that you could not ever imagine.
I'll be texting you angry things also if they lose the game. That's just horrible.
Yeah. All right. For Jake Sorensen, I'm Mike Schaefer, and invite you to check out everything we have going on at Husker 24/7. Plenty of recruiting coverage, big visit weekend as well. You can look for even more of that here throughout the week. Nebraska State High School playoffs come to their conclusion Monday, Tuesday. We'll have some coverage of especially the big Class A game, Millard South, Omaha West Side. So we'll have that at Husker 24/7. And, of course, plenty of coverage, basketball, football. Husker basketball back in action on Wednesday against South Dakota. Nebraska football back in action Friday against Iowa. Husker 24/7 is your spot for that. So for Jake Sorensen, I'm Mike Schaefer. Appreciate your time. Have a great Sunday. We'll catch you next time.